The rain battered the windows of our cramped New York apartment, a relentless drumbeat that matched the pounding in my chest. I sat on the couch, clutching a mug of tea that had long gone cold, staring at the door like it held the answer to every question I'd never dared to ask. When the knob finally turned at 2 a.m., and Riley stumbled in, drunk, radiant, and utterly unaware of the storm she was about to unleash, my world tilted. Riley was my roommate, my best friend, the straight girl I'd been secretly in love with for 2 years. Her blonde hair was a mess, her mascara smudged, and her sequin dress clung to her like a second skin, but God, she was beautiful. She kicked off her heels, laughing as she nearly tripped over the rug, and I tried to ignore the way my heart lurched at the sight of her. "Ellie, you're still up," she slurred, flopping onto the couch beside me, her thigh brushing mine. The scent of vodka and her floral perfume hit me like a wave, and I gripped my mug tighter. "You're always so responsible." I forced a smile, my voice steady despite the chaos inside. "Someone's gotta make sure you get home safe." She grinned, her blue eyes catching the dim light of the lamp. My hero. Then, without warning, she leaned in, her lips crashing against mine. Time stopped. Her kiss was sloppy, desperate, and tasted like cheap liquor. But it was everything I'd ever wanted and everything I knew I shouldn't have. I froze, my mind screaming to pull away, but my body betrayed me, leaning into her warmth. She pulled back, giggling, her face flushed. Whoops. That was wow, okay. She didn't apologize, didn't explain. She just stared at me, her gaze unsteady but piercing, like she was seeing me for the first time. My heart was a runaway train, and I couldn't tell if this was a drunken mistake or the beginning of something I'd never dared to hope for. I'd known I was a lesbian since I was 16, coming out to my conservative family in Ohio and watching their faces harden with disappointment. Moving to New York for college was my escape, a chance to be myself without judgment. Riley, though, she was the opposite. She grew up in a small town in Georgia, all charm and confidence, dating guys who never seemed to stick around. We met freshman year, bonded over late-night study sessions and shared dreams of making it in the city. I was the quiet artist sketching in corners. She was the aspiring journalist, always chasing a story. We moved in together last year, and I thought I could handle living with her, loving her in secret. But that kiss, her lips on mine, reckless and raw, cracked open every wall I'd built. "Riley, you're drunk," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I stood, putting distance between us, my hands shaking. "You don't know what you're doing." She frowned, sitting up straighter. "Don't tell me what I know, Ellie." Her tone was sharp, almost defensive, and it sent a shiver down my spine. Maybe I wanted to do that. My breath caught. "You're straight. You've said it a million times." She laughed, but it was bitter, not her usual carefree sound. "Yeah, well, maybe I'm not as sure as I thought." She stood, swaying slightly, and took a step toward me. "Maybe I've been thinking about you. A lot." I wanted to believe her. Every fiber of me screamed to pull her close, to kiss her again, to let this moment rewrite everything. But doubt gnawed at me. She was drunk, emotional, probably reeling from whatever had happened at that party. I'd seen her flirt with guys, heard her talk about her type. Tall, broad-shouldered, nothing like me. Was this real, or was I just a convenient outlet for her confusion? "Riley, we should talk about this tomorrow," I said, my voice cracking. "When you're sober." Her face fell, and for a moment, she looked so vulnerable I wanted to take it all back. But then she nodded, brushing past me toward her room. "Fine. Tomorrow." The door clicked shut, and I was left alone with the rain and the ghost of her kiss. The next morning, I woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of Riley humming in the kitchen. She was making breakfast, her hair pulled back in a messy bun, wearing an oversized t-shirt that slipped off one shoulder. She acted like nothing had happened. No mention of the kiss, no hint of the words that had turned my world upside down. I stood in the doorway watching her flip pancakes, my heart sinking. "Hey, you're up," she said brightly, sliding a plate toward me. "I made your favorite, blueberry." "Thanks," I mumbled, sitting at the counter. I waited for her to say something, anything about last night. But she just chatted about her article deadline and the weather, her voice light and carefree. It was like the kiss had been erased, like I'd imagined it. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but fear held me back. What if she regretted it? What if she didn't even remember? The day passed in a haze. I went to my art studio, sketching furiously, trying to pour my confusion into charcoal and paper. Riley texted me about groceries, about a movie night later, as if we were just roommates, just friends. But every time I closed my eyes, I felt her lips, heard her say she'd been thinking about me. I couldn't shake it. That night, we watched some rom-com on the couch, her feet tucked under a blanket, inches from mine. The tension was unbearable. Every laugh and glance from her a knife to my heart. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. Riley, I said, pausing the movie, we need to talk about last night. Her smile faded, and she looked away, picking at the blanket. What's there to talk about? I was drunk, Ellie. It was stupid. My stomach dropped. Stupid. She sighed, running a hand through her hair. I didn't mean it like that. It's just I don't know what I'm doing, okay? I'm not like you. The words stung, but her voice was soft, almost pleading. I wanted to push, to ask what she meant, but the fear of losing her altogether stopped me. Okay, I said quietly. Let's just forget it. But we couldn't. The air between us had changed, thick with unspoken questions. Over the next week, Riley was distant, spending more time out, coming home late. I threw myself into my art, painting her in secret, her eyes, her smile, the way she looked at me that night. I hated how much I wanted her, how much it hurt to think she might never want me back. Then one evening, I came home to find her sitting on the couch, a bottle of wine and 2 glasses on the table. She looked nervous, her fingers twisting together. Ellie, she said, her voice low. I need to tell you something. My heart raced. I sat across from her, bracing for the worst. What is it? She took a deep breath, her eyes meeting mine. I haven't been honest with you. Or with myself. She paused, her voice trembling. That night it wasn't just the alcohol. I meant to kiss you. And I'm scared because I think I want to do it again. Her words hung in the air, fragile and electric, like a spark waiting to ignite. I stared at Riley, my mind racing to catch up with my heart, which was already halfway across the room to her. The vulnerability in her eyes, the way her hands fidgeted with the hem of her shirt, it was all so unlike the confident, carefree Riley I knew. Say something, she whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the city outside. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. What could I say? That I dreamed of this moment for years? That I was terrified she'd change her mind again? Instead, I stood, crossing the small space between us, and sat beside her. My hand hovered near hers, unsure. Riley, are you sure? You said you're straight. You've always. I know what I said, she interrupted, her voice sharp but trembling. But I've been lying to myself for a long time. Maybe forever. She looked down, her blonde hair falling over her face like a curtain. I've always felt something for you. I just didn't know what it was until that night. My chest tightened, hope and fear warring inside me. Why didn't you say anything before? She laughed, a bitter sound. Because I was scared, Ellie. I grew up in a place where people like me, people like us, weren't exactly celebrated. My mom would have lost it. My friends would have called me confused. I thought if I just kept dating guys, it'd go away. She met my eyes, her gaze raw. It didn't. I wanted to reach for her, to pull her into my arms and tell her it was okay, that I understood. But I needed to know this was real. What changed? I asked softly. Why now? She hesitated, then reached for the wine bottle, pouring herself a glass with shaky hands. Last week, at that party I was with this guy, some editor I was trying to impress for a job. He was charming, perfect on paper. But all I could think about was you. How you'd be waiting up, probably with that stupid tea you never drink. She smiled faintly. I realized I didn't want to be there. I wanted to be here. With you. Her words hit me like a tidal wave, washing away the doubt I'd clung to. I reached out, my fingers brushing hers, and she didn't pull away. Instead, she laced her fingers through mine, her touch warm and grounding. I'm not saying I have it all figured out, she said. But I want to try. With you. If you'll let me. I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. We sat there, hands clasped, the weight of her confession settling between us. For the first time, I let myself believe this could be real. Not a drunken mistake, not a fleeting moment, but something worth fighting for. The next few weeks were a blur of tentative steps and stolen moments. Riley was still Riley, bold, impulsive, sometimes infuriatingly oblivious, but she was trying. She'd brush her hand against mine when we cooked dinner, her touch lingering just long enough to make my heart race. We'd stay up late talking, her head resting on my shoulder as we shared stories we'd never told anyone else. She told me about her childhood, about the pressure to be the perfect daughter, the perfect girl. I told her about my family's rejection, how I'd learned to build walls to protect myself. But those walls were crumbling. One night, as we sat on the fire escape, watching the city glitter below, she kissed me again. This time she was sober, her lips soft and deliberate. It wasn't desperate or reckless, it was a promise. I kissed her back, my hands tangling in her hair, and for the first time I felt like I could breathe. Still doubt lingered. Riley was still figuring herself out, and I could see the fear in her eyes sometimes, like she was waiting for the world to judge her. I worried she'd wake up one day and decide this was too hard, too much. And then there was the world outside our apartment, her friends, her family, the life she'd built as the straight girl. How would she navigate that? One afternoon we went to a cafe in the village, a place we'd been to 100 times. Riley was nervous, her leg bouncing under the table as she sipped her latte. "I told Sarah about us," she said suddenly, her eyes fixed on her cup. Sarah was her best friend from college, the one who threw the parties Riley always dragged me to. "What did she say?" I asked, bracing myself. Riley shrugged, but her jaw was tight. She was weird about it. Said she didn't get why I'd switched teams out of nowhere. Like it's a game. She looked at me, her eyes searching. I don't know how to explain it to her. To anyone. "You don't owe anyone an explanation," I said, reaching for her hand. "You're allowed to just be." She squeezed my hand, but her smile was strained. "I know. But it's hard. I feel like I'm letting everyone down." "You're not," I said fiercely. "You're being honest. That's braver than anything." She nodded, but I could tell she wasn't convinced. That night, she got a call from her mom. I only heard her side of the conversation, short, clipped responses, her voice tight with tension. When she hung up, she was quiet, staring at her phone like it was a bomb. "She wants me to come home for Thanksgiving," she said finally. "She heard from Sarah's mom that I'm different now." My stomach twisted. "What did you tell her?" I said I'd think about it. She looked at me, her eyes filled with a mix of fear and determination. "I want you to come with me, Ellie. I want them to meet you." The invitation hit me like a punch. Meeting her family was a step I hadn't expected, not so soon. I knew what it meant, facing their judgment, their questions, maybe their rejection. But I also saw the hope in her eyes, the way she was reaching for me, asking me to stand with her. "Okay," I said, my voice steady despite the fear clawing at my chest. "I'll go." The drive to Riley's hometown in Georgia felt like a journey into another world. New York's concrete jungle faded into endless highways, then into quiet roads lined with oak trees and sprawling lawns. Riley's hand rested on my knee as she drove, her thumb tracing small circles, but her silence spoke louder than her touch. I could feel her tension, the way her shoulders stiffened every time her phone buzzed with a new message from her mom. "Are you sure about this?" I asked as we passed a faded welcome sign for her town. We could turn back. She glanced at me, her lips curving into a small, determined smile. "No way. I'm done running." Her family's house was a two-story colonial, all white paint and neatly trimmed hedges. It screamed small-town perfection, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone's business. As we pulled into the driveway, Riley's mom stepped onto the porch, her smile polite but guarded. She was an older version of Riley, same blonde hair, same sharp blue eyes, but her warmth felt practiced, like she was sizing me up. "Ellie, this is my mom, Linda," Riley said, her voice steady but her hand gripping mine tightly. "Nice to meet you," I said, offering a smile I hoped looked genuine. Linda's handshake was firm, her eyes flicking between us. "Welcome," she said, her tone clipped. "Dinner's almost ready." Inside, the house smelled of roasted turkey and cinnamon, A picture-perfect Thanksgiving scene. Riley's dad, a quiet man with a graying beard, nodded at me from the recliner. Her younger brother, Jake, barely looked up from his phone. The air was thick with unspoken questions, and I felt like an intruder in their world. Dinner was a minefield. Linda asked about my art, my family, my life in New York, but every question felt like a test. Riley tried to keep things light, joking about our apartment's leaky faucet, but her laugh was strained. Then, halfway through the meal, Jake looked up, his eyes narrowing. "So you two are like a couple now?" he asked, his tone more curious than hostile. Riley froze, her fork hovering over her plate. I held my breath, waiting for her to answer. She told me she wanted to be open, but saying it out loud here was different. "Yeah," she said finally, her voice clear. "We are." Linda's smile faltered, and her dad coughed into his napkin. Jake just shrugged, going back to his phone. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the clink of silverware. Later, in Riley's childhood bedroom, we lay on her twin bed, staring at the glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I didn't think it'd be this hard." "It's okay," I said, turning to face her. "You were honest. That's what matters." She reached for my hand, her fingers trembling. "I don't know if I can do this, Ellie. They're my family, but they look at me like I'm someone else now." "You're still you," I said fiercely. "And I'm here. We'll figure it out together." The next day things got worse. Linda cornered Riley in the kitchen, her voice low but sharp. I overheard snippets, words like phase and confusion, and my heart ached for Riley. When she came back to the bedroom, her eyes were red, but she didn't cry. Instead, she packed her bag. "We're leaving," she said, her voice firm. "I can't stay here." I didn't argue. We said quick goodbyes, Linda's hug stiff and Jake's wave half-hearted. As we drove away, Riley was quiet, her hands tight on the steering wheel. I wanted to comfort her, but I didn't know how. All I could do was sit beside her, hoping my presence was enough. Back in New York, Riley threw herself into her work, staying out late at the newsroom. I tried to give her space, but the distance between us grew. She was still affectionate, kissing me goodnight, holding my hand, but I could feel her pulling away, wrestling with something she wouldn't share. One night, I found her on the fire escape, staring at the city lights. "Talk to me," I said, sitting beside her. "What's going on?" She sighed, her breath visible in the cold air. "I keep thinking about home, about how they looked at me. I thought I was ready to be this, but maybe I'm not." My heart sank, but I kept my voice steady. "You don't have to have it all figured out, Riley, but don't shut me out." She looked at me, her eyes glistening. "I don't want to lose you, but I'm scared I'll mess this up." "You won't," I said, taking her hand. "We're in this together, remember?" She nodded, leaning her head on my shoulder. For a moment, we were just two women on a fire escape, holding on to each other against the weight of the world. But I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, not for her, not for us. Winter settled over New York, blanketing the city in snow and a quiet that felt both peaceful and oppressive. Riley and I were trying, but the cracks from Georgia lingered. She'd smile, kiss me, laugh at my bad jokes, but there were moments when her eyes went distant, like she was carrying a weight I couldn't see. I wanted to fix it, to make her feel safe, but love, I was learning, wasn't always enough. One evening, we went to a gallery opening where one of my paintings was on display. A vibrant abstract inspired by that night. She kissed me. Riley stood beside me, her arm around my waist, but I could feel her tension as people milled around us. A friend from my art class, Mia, approached, her grin wide. "Ellie, this is incredible," Mia said, gesturing to my painting. "And you must be Riley. I've heard so much about you." Riley's smile was tight, but she shook Mia's hand. "Nice to meet you." Mia, oblivious to the undercurrent, kept talking. "You two make such a cute couple. How long have you been together?" I felt Riley stiffen. "A few months," I answered quickly, hoping to ease the moment. But Mia's enthusiasm didn't let up, and she started asking Riley about her coming out story. I saw the panic in Riley's eyes, the way her hand tightened on her wine glass. I need some air, Riley muttered, slipping away before I could stop her. I found her outside, leaning against the brick wall, her breath fogging in the cold. I'm sorry, I said, standing beside her. Mia didn't mean to. It's not her, Riley cut in, her voice sharp. It's me. I don't know how to do this, Ellie. Everyone expects me to have it all figured out, to be proud or whatever. But I'm not there yet. I swallowed the hurt, trying to understand. You don't have to be anything you're not ready for. But you can't keep running from it. She looked at me, her eyes searching. What if I'm not cut out for this? What if I can't handle the way people look at us? Her words cut deep, but I kept my voice steady. Then we figure it out. Together. But you have to let me in. She nodded, but the doubt in her eyes lingered. Over the next few weeks she started pulling away again, working late, avoiding our usual routines. I tried to be patient, but the fear that she'd walk away entirely grew stronger every day. One night I came home to find a letter on the counter, written in Riley's neat handwriting. My heart dropped as I opened it, expecting the worst. Instead, it was a confession. A raw, messy outpouring of her fears, her hopes, her love for me. She wrote about her struggle to reconcile her feelings with the life she'd always known. About how loving me felt like both a rebellion and a homecoming. I'm scared, she wrote. But I'm more scared of losing you. I found her in her room, curled up on her bed, her eyes red. You read it? She asked, her voice small. Yeah, I said, sitting beside her. Why didn't you just tell me? Because I'm a coward, she said, her voice breaking. I keep thinking I'll hurt you, that I'll never be enough. I took her hand, my own eyes stinging. You're enough, Riley. You've always been enough. She leaned into me, her head on my chest, and we stayed like that for a long time. The letter crumpled between us. It wasn't a fix, not entirely, but it was a start, a promise to keep trying, to keep choosing each other. The holidays came, and with them, an invitation to a New Year's Eve party at Sarah's loft. Riley hesitated, remembering Sarah's reaction, but I convinced her to go. We'll face it together, I said, and she nodded, her hand finding mine. The party was loud, crowded, a mix of familiar faces and strangers. Sarah greeted us warmly, but I could see the curiosity in her eyes, the way she watched Riley. As the night wore on, Riley relaxed, laughing and dancing with me, her hand never leaving mine. For a moment it felt like we'd found our place, like the world could accept us. Then just before midnight, Sarah pulled Riley aside. I watched from across the room, my stomach twisting as Sarah's expression grew serious. When Riley came back, her face was pale. What happened? I asked, pulling her to a quiet corner. She apologized, Riley said, her voice unsteady. Said she didn't mean to be weird before. But then she asked if I was sure about this, about us. Said I didn't seem like the type. Anger flared in my chest. She doesn't get to decide who you are. Riley nodded, but her eyes were distant. I know, but it still hurts. As the countdown to midnight began, I took her face in my hands, forcing her to meet my eyes. You are enough, I said. For me, for yourself, for anyone who matters. Okay. She smiled, tears brimming, and nodded. When the clock struck midnight, we kissed, the noise of the party fading away. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. The new year brought a fragile hope, like the first green shoots breaking through snow. Riley and I were finding a rhythm, learning to navigate the push and pull of her uncertainty and my patience. But the world outside our apartment wasn't always kind. Whispers followed us, coworkers, friends, even strangers on the subway who noticed our clasped hands and looked away too quickly. I was used to it, hardened by years of being out, but Riley was still raw, every glance a reminder of the life she was redefining. One morning she came home from a run, her face flushed with more than just exertion. I got an email from my mom, she said, tossing her phone onto the counter. She wants to visit. My stomach twisted. Here? In New York. Riley nodded, her jaw tight. She says she wants to understand. But I don't know if I believe her. I reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. What do you want to do? She sighed, leaning against the counter. I want her to see us. really see us. But I'm scared she'll just judge. We spent the next week preparing, cleaning the apartment, talking through what to say. Riley was nervous, her usual confidence replaced by a quiet intensity. I tried to be her anchor, but I was scared too. What if her mom's visit broke the fragile thing we were building? When Linda arrived, she was polite but distant, her eyes scanning our apartment like she was looking for clues. We took her to dinner at a small Italian place, making small talk about her flight and the weather. But over dessert, she finally addressed the elephant in the room. "Riley," she said, setting down her fork, "I've been trying to understand this choice you've made. But it's hard for me. You've always been so normal." Riley's face paled, but her voice was steady. "It's not a choice, Mom. It's who I am. And Ellie's a part of that." Linda's eyes flicked to me, and I braced myself. "I just want you to be happy," she said finally, but her tone was heavy, like happiness was something she couldn't quite imagine for us. The visit was tense, but Riley held her ground, and I was proud of her. When Linda left, she hugged Riley tightly, whispering something I couldn't hear. Riley didn't tell me what it was, but she seemed lighter after, like a weight had lifted. Spring came, and with it a sense of renewal. Riley started opening up more, sharing her fears and dreams with a vulnerability that made me love her even more. We took a trip to the Hudson Valley, just the two of us, staying in a small cabin surrounded by wildflowers. One night, as we lay under the stars, she turned to me, her eyes bright. "I love you," she said, the words simple but heavy with meaning. "I don't know if I'm doing this right, but I know I love you." I kissed her, my heart full. "I love you too." Back in the city, life wasn't perfect. Riley still struggled with her identity, with the labels people tried to pin on her. But she was trying, and that was enough. We started talking about the future, moving to a bigger apartment, maybe getting a dog. It felt like a dream, one I was finally allowing myself to believe in. Then one day Riley came home with news. "I got a job offer," she said, her voice a mix of excitement and nerves. "In San Francisco. It's a big step up. Senior reporter at a major outlet." My heart sank, but I forced a smile. "That's amazing, Riley. You deserve it." She looked at me, her eyes searching. "It's a lot to ask, but would you come with me?" The question hung between us, heavy with possibility. San Francisco meant a fresh start, but it also meant leaving behind the life we'd built here. The apartment, my art community, our routines. I thought about the night she came home drunk, the kiss that changed everything, and all the moments since that had brought us here. "I need to think about it," I said, my voice soft. "But I want to be with you, wherever that is." She nodded, pulling me into a hug. "Take your time. I'm not going anywhere without you." That night I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. Moving across the country was a leap, but so was loving Riley. Every step had been a risk, a choice to trust in something bigger than fear. I thought about the girl I'd been 2 years ago, too scared to hope for this, and the woman I was now, ready to fight for it. The decision to move to San Francisco wasn't easy, but it felt right. Riley's job offer was a chance for her to shine, and I wanted to be there for it. I spent weeks tying up loose ends, selling my paintings, saying goodbye to friends, packing up our tiny apartment. Every box we taped shut felt like a step towards something new, something we were building together. We found a small apartment in the Mission District, with creaky floors and a view of the bay. The first night we sat on the floor surrounded by unpacked boxes, eating takeout and laughing about the chaos of the move. Riley leaned against me, her head on my shoulder, and I felt a peace I hadn't known was possible. "It's different here," she said, her voice soft. "I feel like I can breathe." San Francisco was vibrant, alive with a community that embraced us in ways New York hadn't. We found queer-friendly cafes, art collectives, and bars where no one batted an eye at two women holding hands. Riley seemed to relax, her confidence returning. She threw herself into her new job, coming home with stories of investigative pieces and late-night deadlines. I found a studio space, painting with a freedom I hadn't felt in years. But change wasn't without its challenges. Riley's work kept her busy, and I sometimes felt like I was sharing her with the world. There were nights when she'd come home exhausted, barely able to keep her eyes open, and I'd wonder if we were drifting apart. I pushed the thought away, focusing on the moments we did have, lazy Sundays in bed, walks along the Embarcadero, her hand in mine. One evening she came home with a surprise, a small velvet box. My heart stopped as she opened it, revealing a simple silver ring. "It's not a proposal," she said quickly, her cheeks flushing. "Not yet. But it's a promise. That I'm in this, Ellie. For real." I slipped the ring onto my finger, tears blurring my vision. "I'm in too," I whispered, pulling her into a kiss. The ring became a talisman, a reminder of what we were building. But life has always had other plans. One day Riley got a call from Jake. Their mom was sick, breast cancer caught early but serious. Riley's face crumpled as she hung up, and I knew what was coming. "I have to go back," she said, her voice hollow. "Just for a while. To help." "Of course," I said, taking her hand. "Do you want me to come?" She shook her head. "I need to do this alone. I need to fix things with her." I nodded, my throat tight. I knew this was about more than her mom's illness. It was about the rift that had opened in Georgia, the need to prove she could be herself and still be their daughter. I hated letting her go, but I loved her too much to hold her back. The weeks without Riley were lonely. We talked every day, but her voice was strained, weighed down by hospital visits and tense conversations with her family. I threw myself into my art, painting a series inspired by her bold, vibrant pieces that captured her strength and vulnerability. The studio became my refuge, a place to pour out my fears and hopes. When Riley finally came back, she was different, quieter, but not in the distant way she'd been before. She seemed grounded, like she'd found a piece of herself she'd been missing. "Mom's going to be okay," she said, sitting on our couch, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea. And we talked. Really talked. She doesn't fully get it, but she's trying. I smiled, relief flooding me. "That's huge, Riley." She nodded, her eyes meeting mine. I told her about the ring. About us. "She wants to meet you again, properly this time." The words settled over me, warm and heavy. It wasn't acceptance, not fully, but it was a start. We spent the rest of the night curled up together talking about the future. Not just San Francisco, but beyond. A life where we could be ourselves together without fear. As summer approached, we started planning a trip back to New York, a chance to reconnect with friends and show them who we'd become. Riley was excited, her confidence infectious. She talked about pitching a feature on queer communities in San Francisco, a way to tell her story through her work. I was proud of her, prouder than I could say. One night, as we walked home from a gallery show, Riley stopped under a streetlight, pulling me close. "I used to think love was supposed to be easy," she said, her voice soft. "But this, you and me, it's hard and it's messy, but it's worth it." I kissed her, the city humming around us, and knew she was right. Love wasn't a fairy tale. It was a choice, a fight, a promise we kept making every day. Back in New York, the city felt both familiar and foreign. The same crowded streets, the same honking taxis, but we were different, stronger, more sure of ourselves. We stayed with Mia, who'd become a close friend, her loft a chaotic mix of art supplies and half-empty wine bottles. She threw a welcome-back party, filling the space with friends from our old life, all eager to see who we'd become. Riley was radiant, her laughter easy as she told stories about San Francisco. I watched her from across the room, my heart swelling with pride. She'd come so far from the girl who'd stumbled into our apartment drunk, unsure of herself. Now she held my hand openly, her ring glinting in the light, a quiet declaration of us. But not everyone was ready to embrace us. Sarah was there, her smile tight as she watched us. Later she pulled me aside, her voice low. "I'm happy for you, Ellie, really. But Riley, she's changed so much. Are you sure she's all in?" I bristled but kept my voice calm. "She's where she wants to be. With me." Sarah nodded, but her doubt lingered, a shadow I couldn't shake. When I told Riley later, she sighed, her shoulders slumping. "She's not wrong to wonder," she admitted. "I've spent my whole life trying to be what people expect. Sometimes I still feel like I'm figuring out who I am." I took her hand, my voice firm. "You don't have to have it all figured out. Just keep choosing me. She smiled, leaning her forehead against mine. Always. The trip wasn't all heavy moments. We revisited our old haunts, the cafe in the village, the fire escape where we'd shared our first sober kiss. Each place felt like a milestone, a piece of our story. Riley's article was published, a powerful piece on queer identity that went viral, sparking conversations online. She was nervous about the attention, but I could see the pride in her eyes, the way she was starting to own her truth. One afternoon we went to the Met, wandering through the galleries hand in hand. In front of a painting of two women, their faces soft with love, Riley stopped, her voice quiet. "This is us," she said, squeezing my hand. "Not perfect but real." I nodded, my throat tight. Real's better. Back in San Francisco, we settled into a new routine. Riley's work kept her busy, but she made time for us. Cooking dinner, planning weekend getaways. I started teaching art classes, finding joy in helping others create. Our apartment became a home, filled with plants, books, and the quiet comfort of each other's presence. But life has always had surprises. One day, Riley got a call from her editor. They wanted her to cover a story in London. A temporary assignment, 3 months. It was a huge opportunity, but it meant being apart. I saw the conflict in her eyes, the fear of leaving me, of disrupting what we'd built. "Go," I said, my voice steady despite the ache in my chest. "This is your dream. I'll be here when you get back." She shook her head, tears brimming. "I don't want to do this without you." "Then we'll figure it out," I said, pulling her close. "We always do." We spent the next week talking logistics, video calls, visits, how to make it work. It wasn't ideal, but it was ours. The night before she left, we stayed up late, tangled in each other's arms, promising to hold on no matter the distance. Riley's time in London was hard, but we made it work. Late-night calls, care packages, letters filled with love and longing. I painted her absence, canvases full of color and ache, each one a piece of my heart. When she came back, she ran into my arms at the airport, her kiss fierce and desperate. "I'm never leaving you again," she said, half laughing, half crying. I grinned, holding her tight. "Good. Because I'm not letting you go." That night we lay in bed, the city humming outside. Riley traced the ring on my finger, her voice soft. "I used to think I had to choose between who I was and who I loved. But with you I get to be both." Her words settled over me, a warmth that reached every corner of my soul. We weren't perfect, but we were us, two women who'd fought for each other, against doubt, against fear, against a world that didn't always understand. And in that fight, we'd found something worth everything. A year later, we stood on a cliff overlooking the Pacific, the wind tangling our hair as the sun dipped below the horizon. Riley wore a simple white dress, her ring now joined by another, a vow we'd made in front of our closest friends, under a sky painted with pinks and golds. It wasn't a legal ceremony, not yet, but it was ours, a promise sealed with tears and laughter and the weight of everything we'd overcome. The journey hadn't been easy. Riley's family was still learning to accept us, their love cautious but growing. My own family sent a card, a small gesture that meant more than I could say. The world wasn't perfect, but it was changing, and we were part of that change, two women who dared to love in spite of fear. Riley's article had sparked a movement, her words giving voice to others struggling to find their truth. She was working on a book now, a memoir of her journey, and I was her biggest cheerleader. My art was thriving too, my paintings hanging in galleries across the country, each one a piece of our story. We'd faced doubts, distance, and the weight of others' expectations, but we'd chosen each other again and again. That night, as we danced under the stars, Riley whispered in my ear, "You're my home, Ellie. Always." I kissed her, my heart full. Always. Our story wasn't a fairy tale. It was messy, real, and hard one, but it was ours. From a drunken kiss to a life built together, we'd learned that love wasn't about being perfect. It was about showing up every day and choosing to stay. And as the waves crashed below, I knew we'd keep choosing each other, no matter what came next. The sun set, painting the sky with fire, and we stood together, hand in hand, ready for whatever the future held. Because love, our love was worth everything.